My in-laws mocked my cooking, until their guests preferred mine. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I still remember the first time I cooked for David's family. My hands trembled as I arranged the chicken parmesan on the platter, the golden breadcrumbs glistening under the dining room chandelier. I had spent hours perfecting this dish, my grandmother's recipe that had never failed to impress. The aroma of herbs and melted cheese filled the air, and for a moment I felt proud. "Well," Margaret, my mother-in-law, said as she lifted a piece with her fork, examining it like a specimen under a microscope. "This is interesting." The way she said interesting made my stomach drop. It wasn't a compliment. David's father, Robert, took a bite and chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. "It's quite different from how we make chicken in this family," he finally said. "Margaret's been perfecting her recipe for 30 years. "Oh, Robert," Margaret laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "She's young. She'll learn eventually how we do things around here." I forced a smile, my cheeks burning. "I'd love to learn your recipes sometime." "Of course, dear." Margaret patted my hand condescendingly. "Though some things just can't be taught. They come from years of experience, understanding what a family truly needs." David squeezed my knee under the table, trying to offer support, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. He'd grown up eating his mother's cooking, and while he always complimented mine at home, here, surrounded by his family's judgment, he remained silent. "At least David won't starve," Margaret continued with a laugh that cut through me. "Though I do worry about his nutrition sometimes." The chicken suddenly tasted like cardboard in my mouth. That was just the beginning. Every family gathering became an ordeal. Margaret would announce the menu days in advance, always making it clear that she was in charge of the important dishes, the main courses, the signature sides that had been family traditions for generations. If I offered to bring something, she'd assign me the most basic tasks: a simple salad, dinner rolls from the store, or maybe something for the children. "Oh, Sarah's bringing her creative contribution," she'd tell other family members with that same dismissive tone. You know how young wives like to experiment? I tried everything. I researched traditional family recipes online, attempting to recreate dishes that might win their approval. I made pot roasts that fell apart perfectly, mashed potatoes so creamy they could have been served at a restaurant, green bean casseroles topped with crispy onions exactly like the ones Margaret made. "Well, it's edible," Robert would say, the closest thing to a compliment I ever received. "You're getting better, dear," Margaret would add with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Though next time, try not to oversalt the potatoes. We prefer them more subtle in this family." I hadn't oversalted them. They were perfectly seasoned. But I began to doubt myself. The breaking point came during David's birthday dinner. I had spent 3 days preparing beef Wellington, a dish I'd never attempted before but had practiced relentlessly after watching countless cooking videos. The pastry was golden and flaky, the beef perfectly pink, the mushroom duxelles aromatic and rich. I was actually excited to share it. "My goodness," Margaret said when I unveiled it. "How ambitious. I hope it's cooked through. You know how dangerous undercooked beef can be." "It's supposed to be pink in the center," I explained quietly. "That's how Wellington is traditionally served." "Well, I wouldn't know about that," she replied. "We've always believed in cooking meat properly in this family. Safety first, as Robert always says." Uncle Jim, David's father's brother, was there that night with his wife Linda. They were food enthusiasts who traveled frequently and prided themselves on their culinary adventures. "This looks restaurant quality," Linda said, accepting a slice. "Where did you learn to make Wellington?" Before I could answer, Margaret interjected. Oh, she's been watching those cooking shows. You know how it is with young people these days? Always trying to show off instead of learning the basics. But Jim took a bite and his eyes widened. This is exceptional, Sarah. The pastry is perfectly flaky and the beef is cooked exactly right. The flavors are incredible. It really is wonderful, Linda agreed. I've had Wellington at some high-end restaurants, and this rivals the best of them. For a moment, the table fell silent. I watched Margaret's face tighten as Jim asked for seconds, as Linda requested the recipe, as other family members began to murmur their appreciation. Well, Margaret said finally, I'm sure it's fine for special occasions, but you can't feed a family experimental dishes every day. Sometimes simple, traditional food is what people really need. That night, David and I drove home in silence. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Do they hate me? I asked, my voice breaking. David sighed. They don't hate you. They're just set in their ways. My mother's always been the cook in the family. She's probably feeling a little territorial. A little territorial? I laughed bitterly. David, she treats me like I'm playing house. Like I'm some incompetent child who can't be trusted to feed you properly. She'll come around, he said. But he didn't sound convinced. When? When will she come around? I've been trying for 2 years. I've made everything exactly how she does it. I've taken her criticism and tried to improve. Nothing I do is ever good enough. David reached over and took my hand. Your cooking is amazing. You know that, right? I love everything you make. Then why don't you ever defend me? The question hung in the air between us. David opened his mouth, then closed it, and I knew I had my answer. That night, something changed in me. I realized I'd been cooking for the wrong people. I had been trying to please Margaret and Robert, trying to fit into their narrow definition of what family food should be. But food, real food, comes from the heart. It's about nourishing the people you love, expressing creativity and care through flavors and textures and aromas that tell a story. I stopped trying to recreate Margaret's recipes. Instead, I dove deeper into my own culinary journey. I explored cuisines from around the world, experimented with flavor combinations that excited me, and reconnected with the joy I had always found in cooking. I took a Thai cooking class and learned to balance sweet, sour, salty, and spicy. I practiced French techniques until I could make a perfect roux in my sleep. I grew herbs on my windowsill and learned to trust my palate over any recipe. David noticed the change. Our dinners at home became more adventurous, more delicious. Friends started asking to come over just to try my latest creation. My confidence in the kitchen grew with each successful dish, each compliment from someone whose opinion I actually valued. But the family gatherings continued to be torture. If anything, Margaret's comments became more pointed as my skills improved. Sarah made something exotic again, she'd announce when I brought a dish. I hope everyone's feeling adventurous tonight. When I brought homemade pad thai that was perfectly balanced and aromatic, she wrinkled her nose. It's a bit too foreign for me. I prefer food I can pronounce. When I made coq au vin, a classic French dish, she said, well, aren't we fancy? I suppose plain chicken isn't good enough anymore. Each comment was designed to make me feel small, to remind everyone that I was an outsider trying too hard to impress. But something had shifted. The comments still stung, but they no longer made me doubt myself. I knew my food was good. I could taste it. David could taste it. Our friends could taste it. The real test came 6 months later. Margaret had announced that she was hosting a dinner party for Robert's colleagues from the law firm where he had worked before retirement. It was clearly important to her. She spent weeks planning the menu, ordering special china, and making sure everything would be perfect. She wanted to show off her hosting skills to people she still hoped to impress. I'll handle all the food, of course, she told me during our weekly Sunday dinner. But you could bring a simple dessert if you'd like. Nothing too elaborate. We don't want to overwhelm the palate after a proper meal. I almost said no. Almost decided to skip the dinner entirely. But something in her tone, that familiar dismissive certainty, sparked something in me. Actually, I said. I'd love to contribute more than just dessert. Why don't I bring a few appetizers? Margaret's eyebrows rose. Oh, I already have appetizers planned. My famous spinach and artichoke dip and those little pinwheels everyone loves. I was thinking of something a bit different. Maybe some small bites that would pair well with cocktails? I could see David tense beside me, recognizing the dangerous territory we were entering. Well, Margaret said slowly, I suppose if you want to bring something extra, that would be fine. Just nothing too spicy or unusual. These are sophisticated people with traditional tastes. Of course, I smiled. I'll make sure everything is appropriate. Over the next 2 weeks, I planned my menu carefully. I wasn't going to bring anything too exotic or challenging. I was smarter than that now. Instead, I focused on elevated versions of familiar flavors. Bacon-wrapped scallops with a maple glaze, prosciutto-wrapped asparagus with lemon aioli, smoked salmon canapes on homemade blinis, beef tenderloin crostini with horseradish cream. Each bite was designed to be recognizable yet sophisticated, comfort food elevated to restaurant quality. But I didn't stop there. Margaret had mentioned making prime rib for the main course, which I knew would be well done and unseasoned, her standard approach to traditional cooking. I decided to make my own contribution to the main course as well. Lamb with a herb crust and red wine reduction, something that would complement rather than compete with her prime rib, but would showcase what properly seasoned, perfectly cooked meat could taste like. For dessert, instead of the simple fruit tart Margaret had suggested, I made individual chocolate lava cakes with vanilla bean ice cream and fresh berry coulis. Impressive, but not so unusual that anyone could call them too foreign. The night of the dinner party, I arrived early to help set up. Margaret was already in full hostess mode, wearing her best dress and directing everyone on where to place the flowers, how to arrange the chairs, what serving dishes to use for each course. "Oh, good, you're here," she said when she saw me carrying my various dishes. "You can put those little appetizer things in the kitchen. I'll bring them out with mine when it's time." I watched her unwrap her spinach artichoke dip and arrange store-bought crackers around it. The pinwheels were exactly what I expected. Cream cheese and deli turkey rolled in tortillas and sliced. They weren't bad, but they looked like something from a church potluck, not a sophisticated dinner party. "These look lovely," I said, arranging my canapes on elegant serving platters I had brought. The scallops glistened with their glaze. The blinis were perfectly golden. The beef crostini looked like something from a high-end cocktail party. Margaret glanced over, and I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. "Well, they're certainly elaborate." The guests began arriving at 6. I recognized most of them. Lawyers and their wives, people Margaret had mentioned wanting to impress for years. They were well-dressed, well-traveled people who clearly appreciated the finer things in life. When the appetizers were served, I watched from the kitchen as Margaret presented her offerings with pride. "I made my famous spinach dip," she announced. "It's been a family favorite for years." But I also watched as guests naturally gravitated toward my dishes. I saw them take tentative first bites of the scallops, then immediately reach for seconds. I heard Mrs. Patterson, the senior partner's wife, ask whoever was nearby, "These blinis are incredible. Are they homemade?" "Oh," Margaret said tightly. "Those are Sarah's. My daughter-in-law likes to experiment." But instead of the dismissive reaction Margaret clearly expected, Mrs. Patterson's face lit up. "Sarah, these are restaurant quality. Where did you learn to make blinis like this?" Other guests began chiming in. The salmon canapes disappeared first. The beef crostini were gone within minutes. Meanwhile, Margaret's spinach dip sat largely untouched, and I noticed several people politely took pinwheels but left them on their plates after one bite. I tried to stay in the background, but the guests kept seeking me out. "Did you make these scallops? They're perfectly cooked. The flavor combination on these is incredible. Are you a professional chef?" With each compliment, I watched Margaret's smile grow more strained. When dinner was served, the contrast became even more stark. Margaret's prime rib was exactly as I expected. Gray throughout, under-seasoned, served with plain mashed potatoes and green beans that had been boiled until they were nearly colorless. It wasn't inedible, but it was exactly the kind of uninspired cooking that she had somehow convinced her family was the gold standard. My lamb, on the other hand, was perfectly pink throughout, the herb crust adding both flavor and visual appeal, the red wine reduction rich and complex. I had only made enough for people to have a small portion alongside Margaret's prime rib. I wasn't trying to upstage her completely, but it was clear which dish was disappearing faster. "Margaret," Mrs. Patterson said during dinner, "this lamb is exquisite. Is this another one of Sarah's creations?" Margaret's jaw tightened. "Yes, she made that. The seasoning is perfect. And this sauce, it's like something from a French bistro. Sarah, where did you train?" "I'm self-taught," I said quietly, not wanting to make the situation worse for Margaret. "I just love to cook." "Well, you have real talent," Mr. Patterson chimed in. "We eat at some of the best restaurants in the city, and this rivals any of them." The conversation continued like this throughout dinner. Guests asking about my techniques, requesting recipes, complimenting the flavors and presentation. Meanwhile, Margaret's food, the food she had spent weeks planning and preparing, was received politely but without enthusiasm. But it was dessert that sealed my victory. When I brought out the individual chocolate lava cakes, warm from the oven and plated with artistic drizzles of berry coulis, the entire table fell silent. "Good God," said Mr. Williams, another partner. "This looks like something from Le Bernardin." The first person to cut into their cake gasped as the warm chocolate flowed out. Soon the entire table was making appreciative sounds, talking about the perfect balance of bitter and sweet, the contrast of temperatures, the way the tart berries cut through the rich chocolate. "Sarah," Mrs. Patterson said, setting down her fork with a satisfied sigh, "this is absolutely divine. Margaret, your daughter-in-law is a culinary artist." Margaret's smile looked more like a grimace. "Yes, she's very creative." But the damage was done. The entire evening had become a showcase for my cooking, not hers. These people she had wanted so desperately to impress had spent the night raving about my food while politely enduring hers. After the guests left, the family sat in Margaret's living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "Well," Robert said finally, "that was quite a meal." "Sarah," Linda said, "I have to ask, would you be willing to cater my book club next month? After tonight, I don't think I can serve them my usual cheese and crackers." "Oh, that's not necessary," Margaret interjected quickly. "I'm sure Sarah is too busy to take on catering jobs." "Actually," I said, surprising myself with my boldness, "I'd be happy to help." David squeezed my hand. For once, he was smiling. The ride home was different from all those other nights. This time, David was the one breaking the silence. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I should have defended you years ago. Your cooking has always been incredible, and tonight everyone could see it." "Your mother hates me now," I said, though I found I didn't really care anymore. My mother has always been competitive. She built her identity around being the family cook, and you threatened that. But maybe it's time she realized that there's room for more than one good cook in this family. Over the following weeks, something shifted in the family dynamics. Margaret still made occasional snide comments, but they lacked their former venom. More importantly, other family members began speaking up. "Remember Sarah's lamb from Mom's dinner party?" David's sister Emma said during the next family gathering. "I've been dreaming about that red wine sauce. Sarah, could you teach me how to make it?" "Those scallops were incredible," added David's cousin Mark. "My wife has been trying to recreate them, but we can't get them right." Even Robert, who had never given me more than grudging acknowledgement, began asking questions about my cooking techniques. The final shift came 3 months later at Emma's birthday dinner. Margaret was in charge of the menu, as always, but when she started planning, Emma spoke up. "Mom, would it be okay if Sarah and I collaborated on this one? I really want to try some of those dishes she made at your dinner party." Margaret's face went through several expressions before settling on resigned acceptance. "I suppose, if that's what you want for your birthday." That night, Margaret and I worked side by side in her kitchen for the first time. She watched as I prepared my herb-crusted lamb, asking questions about the seasoning blend and the technique for the reduction sauce. I complimented her knife skills as she prepared vegetables and meant it. She was efficient and precise, even if her flavor instincts were conservative. "I suppose," she said quietly as we plated the main course. "You might have a point about the seasoning. This does smell quite nice." It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. For Margaret, it was huge. The dinner was a success. The family raved about the food, and for the first time, Margaret didn't try to minimize my contributions. She didn't praise them either, but she didn't undermine them. As we cleaned up afterward, she finally spoke directly to me about cooking. "I've been making the same dishes for 30 years, she said, not looking at me as she scrubbed a pan. "Robert likes consistency. The children grew up on my cooking. It never occurred to me that there might be other ways to do things. Your cooking isn't bad," I said, and I meant it. "It's just different. Comfort food has its place. But yours is better," she said simply. I can admit that now. The guests at my dinner party, they made that quite clear. We finished cleaning in comfortable silence. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something approaching respect. Looking back now, 5 years later, I understand that the battle was never really about cooking. It was about territory, about identity, about the fear that admitting someone else's excellence somehow diminished your own worth. Margaret had built her sense of value around being the family's primary cook, and my presence threatened that role. But good food has a way of breaking down barriers. You can't argue with flavor, with technique, with the simple pleasure of a perfectly executed dish. Eventually, even the most stubborn critic has to acknowledge quality when it's presented with confidence and skill. These days, Margaret and I share cooking duties at family gatherings. She handles the comfort food classics that remind everyone of their childhoods, while I contribute dishes that showcase new flavors and techniques. Sometimes she even asks for my recipes, though she always modifies them to suit her more conservative palate. David has learned to defend both of us, speaking up when anyone criticizes either his mother's traditional approach or my more adventurous style. He's learned that supporting me doesn't mean betraying his family. It means expanding the definition of what family food can be. Last month, Margaret asked me to teach her granddaughter, David's niece, how to make my chocolate lava cakes for a school project. As I watched her carefully measure ingredients and follow my instructions, Margaret observed from the kitchen doorway. "She has good instincts," I told Margaret as the little girl confidently whisked the chocolate mixture. "She gets that from both sides of the family, I suppose," Margaret replied. It was the closest thing to a compliment I had ever received from her, and somehow it meant more than all the praise from guests and friends combined. The truth is, we all have something to offer in the kitchen. Margaret's decades of experience feeding a family, my passion for exploring new flavors and techniques, David's growing appreciation for both traditions and innovation, they all have value. The mistake was thinking there was only room for one way of cooking, one definition of what good food should be. Food is love, but it's also art. It's comfort, but it's also adventure. It's tradition, but it's also innovation. There's room at the table for all of it, as long as we're willing to taste with open minds and generous hearts. That night, watching Margaret's granddaughter proudly present her perfectly executed lava cake to her family, I realized that my victory wasn't really about proving my cooking was better than Margaret's. It was about earning the right to contribute my own voice to the family's culinary story, to add my chapter to a cookbook that will be passed down through generations. And in the end, that's all any of us really want: to be tasted, to be appreciated, to know that our love has been received and enjoyed. Whether it comes wrapped in tradition or innovation, whether it's simple or elaborate, whether it follows grandmother's recipe or breaks entirely new ground, if it's made with care and served with love, it deserves a place at the table. The next time someone tells you your cooking isn't traditional enough, remember this: tradition had to start somewhere. Someone at some point had to be brave enough to try something new, to trust their palate over convention, to believe that their contribution had value even when others doubted it. Cook with confidence. Season with courage. Serve with pride. And never ever let anyone convince you that love can only be expressed in one flavor. Your food is your voice. Make sure it's heard.